Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hello and welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast, where today we radiate clarity with love and relationship coach and the author of Soul Statements, a love coach's guide to successful communication, Lyon Folsom. Now, Corey has been a professional tracker, an aboriginal skills instructor, wilderness guide for newly sober people, and a vision quest leader. After a spiritual soul awakening, Corey participated in Ipsalu Source School of Tantra Yoga, Love Coach Academy, and Tony Robbins programs. He is a certified NLP practitioner and love and relationship coach, and he assists people from all over the world to increase the soulfulness, clarity, and ease with which they experience life. Corey is passionate about helping people expand their empathy and up-level communication skills. And I have been having the worst time with communication just reading your bio. It took me like 10 takes to do that. Welcome. Thank you for your patience.
No problem at all.
Corey, I am just giddy because this book seems so wonderful and so needed about this soul language, this communication, this clarity of communication. In fact, in our pre-talk, you said that clarity is the new sexy. And I thought that was brilliant. Why is that the new sexy?
Because you're not playing games. You're not trying to be smarter than you should be or too clever by half. You're just being upfront with what you're up for, what you're not up for. You use your voice. You share what you value, and you are maintaining your own sense of value and just speaking to that, being clear.
Being clear. And that is sexy. I think when you have that line of communication that where you understand each other, understanding and really hearing each other, listening to each other is sexy as hell.
That's right. And I also say in the book Soul Statements that I call it the courage to be clear, because it takes courage to speak when it's something feels a little awkward and say, you know what, I'm going to speak to the awkwardness. I'm not sure what's happening right now. Maybe we could just talk about it and just start there. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'm not sure what I'm feeling. Is everything okay? Do you want to speak to what just was said? And just inquire.
Right. And how are you feeling about this? When this happened, how did that affect you? All of the things. You know, there is something about being on the same page that is very alluring and just deepens that connection, deepens that relationship. Just to have that mutual understanding is so important. So, how did you get started in the relationship and love coaching business in the first place?
Well, in these workshops, I would meet other people doing the workshops. They're interested in self-betterment. They're interested in becoming a better communicator, a better partner. And so just in discussion, I would find myself being asked questions and kind of doing pseudo counseling, and people kept asking me for help. And so I went through Love Coach Academy, and I also had a love and relationship coach of my own for about 2 years. And so that gave me this wonderful template of questioning, of helping people arrive at their own answers. And so that's really just how it all started back in 2012 or so.
Oh, that's quite a while you've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you went to the Tantra Yoga School. What is
Yes.
that about?
Tantra Yoga is a place where we learn to really cherish the beloved that lives within and see your partner as having, an inner beloved as well. And just to honor and respect that we're each beloved means something. It's not just another person, but just to hold our togetherness as like a holy sacrament, just the fact, just being together. And the bulk of the teachings, or the techniques, I should say, involve the breath. So moving the breath, moving energy with the breath inside your body, for grounding yourself, or being in your heart, or just being integrated, centered. And so there's solo practices, and then there's practices together with another person. And really, to me, if I were to do a synopsis of Tantra, it's the essence of paying attention to the moment. And so if you're really feeling the texture, you're inhabiting your body, you're inhabiting present time, that makes for a tantric experience. So if you're really inhabiting the conversation and you're with yourself and you're connected to your own sense of self, well, and you're on a phone call, well, that it's a tantric phone call.
Really good point. I love that. So, I mean, there is a lot that goes into a romantic, a love relationship. I mean, I've read that every relationship is really a relationship with self in the first place,
Mhm.
and then being that present person in relationship.
Right, because we're listening to the voice in our head, and that's sometimes narrating the experience, interpreting the experience, telling us what we might expect going forward. And so we don't get away from that.
No, you take yourself wherever you go.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I like this idea about the voice in your head. You're interacting with the voice in your head as well, because it can be narrating and interpreting the experience, either correctly or incorrectly, or accurately or incorrectly, right? Inaccurately,
yeah.
right?
And that's really part of the genesis of the book Soul Statements too, is that I heard Tony Robbins say one time, our minds aren't designed to make us happy. They're designed to keep us safe. And in order to keep us safe, they're always looking for what potentially could be wrong. And what's wrong is always available. However, what's right is always available too. So I really took that to heart, and I started working with my coaching clients when they're in some kind of distress or feeling helpless or confused. I would say, what are you telling yourself right then? And so
Mhm.
they'd say, oh, this is the message in my head. And the way I do it is I say, oh, when I catch myself, I say, oh, yeah, I used to think that. Or what's really true is, and then I would insert a relevant soul statement. That could be just as simple as saying, I got this, or I can call upon the grit inside me, or my heart is a trusted guide.
So this comes to the notion and the concept of soul statements, the title of the book.
Mhm.
What is a soul statement?
Well, soul statements, it's based on the premise that answers are in your center. And that's where clarity lives.
Mm.
And so it behooves each one of us to spend some time regularly, consistently, in some kind of state where we connect with our own inner stillness. And that could be a hard run or a workout or sitting on a pillow or a beautiful stroll in the forest by a lake or whatever brings you to a place where you can really feel who you are and you feel connected to life. And so, in these times where we are discovering what we value, then there's this clarity just happens. It's like our soul has something to express, it bubbles up, and we're like, oh, yeah, that's me. I value stillness. I value the natural world. I value just the gift of life. And so, when we get to know ourselves a little more with that kind of clarity, then we can form a soul statement that counteracts, that brings that emotional coherence to those times where we otherwise would be saying some kind of negative voice that
Mhm.
brings us more down or moves us more into doubt. Instead, we can remember there's a place at my center where I can tune out everything that's not me. And so that could be a soul statement, or you just remember that. And what's right about me is always available. That's a wonderful thought. And so at these times, you can just pull out these soul statements, and that colors your thinking so that your next thought can be a better one than you otherwise would have had.
Yeah. You know, I'm reading your book right now, the chapter on soul statements. It says affirmations are very useful, but a soul statement is not an ordinary affirmation. A soul statement is a simple and profound reminder of what is already true, which creates greater coherence between surface thinking and your deep knowing. So, can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. And so your deep knowing is something you're born with. And through life, we think thoughts, we have experiences, there's lots of distractions. And if we can connect with what we know to be true about ourselves, I'm a loved child of God. or something else that's just a deeply held knowing, then we can apply that. We can remember that in these moments where we're having something that doesn't align with it. And so it creates that, oh, I'm going to go with I'm a love child of God versus I'm in terrible straits right now. And the real power of it also comes from feeling the truth of it. You want your cells to kind of vibrate with a yes, your bones to just feel a little more heavy and secure, like you just know. And then your next thought, your next action is based on that you're a little stronger than you were thinking just a minute ago.
Well, I like this idea of having coherence between your thoughts, your words, and your actions. So many times, oh, in fact, this just happened this past weekend. You have a conversation or an argument that has you instead of you having it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say I don't have problems, they have me.
Exactly. But, just taking the moment and making sure that your energy, your words, your actions, your thoughts are aligned, creating that clarity.
That's right. And if we're reminding ourselves in this fashion and having that clarity of, oh, this is who I really am, then we're better able to be a little patient with other people, to hold a little tension and not have to just, campaign or defend some point of view or some version of history. We can just let ourselves be okay, hold a little tension and listen, maybe acknowledge the other person. And I love acknowledgement because you don't have to agree. You can say, I get this is distressful for you. I
Yeah.
don't agree that it should be distressful. That doesn't matter. What matters is I'm validating their pain, their experience. And that's a great place to start. Just acknowledge.
Mhm.
And so with that inner clarity, I don't have to have someone else validate it. I've done my own self validation.
Mhm. Oh, I like that. I like that too. And then to be able to have the brave conversation, it does take some bravery to,
Mm-hmm.
take someone's words, that they're upset with you and you're willing to listen to them and hold space for that discomfort. There's
Right.
something sexy about that.
Right. Yeah. So the awkwardness, that awkward moment where you just feel there's this little awkwardness in the air, that's where real bravery comes into play or not. It's to say, yeah,
Yeah,
something's going on. Let's just find out what it is
let's find out.
in the interest of having a good time, in the interest of our friendship. I just want to make sure we're all clear, we're all good. So, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. And then just inviting the other to share their experience without judgment, without attaching any meaning to it of your own, and just allowing it to be. I love the idea of that. It's wonderful.
Hmm.
Um, Now, you did train with Tony Robbins. How did that go? What was that like?
Yes. Oh, fantastic. I've been in the room probably 4 times with him. It just you get a real sense for his big heart when it's live in the room, and he's just on this track, this Tony Robbins track of how can I be better so that I can do more good. And when he works one-on-one with people, he really does care. And so I soaked up every minute of it.
Mhm.
I have 2 sons. I took each one of them separately to a Tony Robbins event too.
Wow,
So we could all, yeah,
wonderful.
yeah, we could all
Walk on
benefit.
hot coals or anything?
We did.
Oh, you did? Oh, I was
Yeah.
being facetious. Oh my gosh, you really did.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. The sons too?
One of them, one wasn't the firewalk event,
Yeah.
but one was, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. So let's shift gears just a little bit here. There are so many relationship books out
Mm.
there, so many communication books. Why did you decide to write one more of these? I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like to ask you a few simple favors. First of all, please rate, review, and share this podcast wherever you're listening. It sounds like a simple little thing, and it is, but it has a huge impact for us because it helps other people find us in the podcasting algorithms. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it helps a lot. Next, if you would subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're listening, just
hit subscribe or follow, and that helps you and it helps us. It helps you because then you receive notifications when we have a new episode that's out. It helps us because, again, algorithm magic, I don't know what happens, but it helps. And then finally, you can support our podcast in a tangible way by going to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast and then click on support the show. Now, we have a new feature too. We are now on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. You can also find the link to Patreon when you go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast. So on Patreon for $3 a month or $5 a month, you can support your metaphysical and spiritual growth. You can learn about upcoming guests and you can get early and ad-free versions of the shows. So please support us. This podcast is free for you to listen, but we have costs, and quite frankly, they come out of my pocket. So if you like this content, if you get a lot out of it, please see what you can do to give back. Thank you so much.
First of all, my coaching clients were just having such great results. I thought I should write this is worth writing about. And so what I thought would be a blog turned into a book. And there's just so many skills involved in relationship being successful. And
Yes.
but one of the great, amazing things is that these are learned skills. So we can learn to acknowledge, we can learn to hold a little tension. We can learn to, when our heart's contracted, maybe offer a little bit of acknowledgement to our own heart before we blurt out something we're going to regret. And I just put my hand on my heart naturally just now. But when my heart contracts or clenches up with like, oh, that's a hurt, or I can go, I love you. It's okay. And so I'm not just speaking too quickly, because that's one of the great skills in relationship when things get emotionally charged, is to slow down. The more you can tap the brakes, the less you're able to say something that you later wish you hadn't have said, or you don't want to cause more wounding. And so tapping the brakes is a great macro skill in relationship. And then that offering a little love to your own heart, I call it speed to empathy. So if you can quickly have a little empathy for, oh, that didn't feel good, then you're more in a position to maybe realize this other person has some pain around whatever it is. I can offer them empathy too, and just listen, acknowledge, and go from there.
That's wonderful. How did you find your way to love and relationship coaching from such a varied background? I mean, I'm looking at the aboriginal skills and the leading people into the wilderness, such a different track. How did you get to the love and relationship coaching?
I was really in the role of a teacher in the wilderness because most of the people, almost exclusively, were newbies. So they didn't know necessarily how to find water, how to skillfully navigate some rim rock so nobody falls off a cliff, or innumerable situations. And the thing about wilderness is it's always, not always, but often bringing something unexpected that, oh, it
Yes.
got dark a lot sooner than you were hoping for. Oh, there's some weather coming in. Oh, I didn't realize this is a big hill between us and where we need to be. I mean, like mountain maybe. And just things happen. And the strong person, that you think, oh, that's somebody that, the group can rely upon and get a lot of the hard work done and lead the way. Maybe they turn their ankle. Now they're the weakest member. And maybe what you thought was the weakest physically, maybe they have that one insight or idea that's like, oh, perfect, we'll do it that way. And that just saved our bacon. And so you get to see how people shine at different times. And when there was a problem in the group, we would sit down in a circle, and anybody could say, hey, I have an issue, let's circle up. And we would just find out what the issue is. And as a group, figure out what we're going to do. I was never really punishment oriented. Say somebody was mad at somebody else and they put some cow droppings in that person's water bottle. It's like, okay, great, it happens. And I don't want to be in the role of like punishing anybody, but it's like, oh, you took away from trust. You took away from safety. You took away from whatever from the group. Let's figure out a way that you can rebuild some trust, you can add some safety. And so then it's incumbent on that person to come up with their own, how am I going to kind of rebalance things? And so then the group can vote, yeah, not good enough, or that's cool, or whatever. And so I was always in this interpersonal mix of the unexpected and having to just be human with each other. So that was great training, I thought, for working with couples, especially. And a lot of the people that work with me are someone that is single, but they want to meet someone, but they thought, I don't want to just repeat the same patterns I've had before. Maybe I should do some work on me to prepare myself to meet someone even more special.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's the position I'm in this stage of life as well. So this really speaks to me a lot. So this process of writing this book, yeah, what was the process like? It speaks volumes, Corey.
Yeah. My writing coach, I was smart enough at least to hire a writing coach out of the gate. And they taught me how to put in the big pieces, like build a skeleton. And if I was going to talk about communication, what would I draw in? So you just work on the bones of it. And then there were some great writing exercises. Like, for instance, I have, say, a chapter on Tantra. And I could say, what would be 10 questions someone might have? And let me just write unedited, no punctuation, just let me write for a timed 2 minutes to answer that. And then just go through and do that with 10 different questions, and then go back and say, oh, there's part of a chapter emerging. So, and we just fleshed it out. And once I had my first draft, then there were somewhere between 50 and 60 full revisions.
Not that we're counting, but that's a lot.
Yeah. When I was in college, my English teacher said, there's no such thing as good writing, only good rewriting.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah. When I used to teach college writing, then I would say the paper's never done. It's never finished. There's just a time when you have to turn it in.
Yeah.
And you hope that it's as good as it's going to be when you do that.
Right.
But it's never finished. In other words, it's never finished. We can always add to it. Now, this book, of course, it has all of the things that you do in your coaching work, but also real life examples of people who've used these soul statements to increase personal fulfillment. Can you share any of that? Any of the success stories or things
Sure.
that have happened?
Yeah, I'll share one short one and one longer one. The short one is this woman I was talking to recently, and she just has one soul statement that she applies in all her situations, and it works really well for her. I mentioned a little bit earlier, and she just simply says, I got this. But the more she says it, the more she really feels that grounds her into her truth, into her strength, and into her capableness. And so that works. She's going forward in life, reminding herself that she's stronger than her mind might think. Then I remember a man, he was just emotionally paralyzed, practically physically paralyzed in social settings. And he had a life such that it put him into social settings very often. And he would just be thinking, no one wants to talk to me. No one is talking to me. So obviously no one wants to talk to me. And he's just feeling less than everyone else seems to be chatting and drinking and mixing and doing whatever they do and seem very happy. And he's just there not talking to anyone, just feeling worse and worse. And so he would just repeat this story. And every week it was more evidence that I'm just being snubbed, looked down upon, being judged negatively. And so through working with him, when he was able to give his brain a different message at those times, you have to do it in the moment, those times of self-doubt, really what it came down to, everything changed for him. So he would silently declare, I am enough. And these people are lucky to have me or to meet me. So I am enough. These people are lucky to meet me. And it was a whole being posture, emotional posture adjustment. And where he was once essentially invisible and ignored, and he found all of a sudden people started seeking him out and asking him about himself and looking to talk and connect. And his life changed overnight. Wonderful outcome.
Oh, that's a fantastic outcome. So, I mean, really the communication that he was practicing was all internal. It was with himself. Right.
Yes. Yeah, and he didn't go and seek out people and make small talk or initiate conversations. It just all of a sudden with that, he was just in a different emotional place and people gravitated to him.
Wow. I'm gonna have to try that. That sounds wonderful. Now, once you do have a relationship, it's inevitable that it's going to be in distress from time to time. So, how can we get out of that relationship distress and into relationship harmony?
Well, first thing that I think of is helps to remember that your partner volunteered for the position.
That's a good point.
Yes. And what you want to pay attention to is your impact on them. So, not, oh, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't take any extra to get that. That's already happening. But what we might not be in the habit of paying attention to is the other person's experience and specifically how my actions or words are impacting them. And so just listen, validate their experience, and with the acknowledgement, like we talked about, and having that still time where you have a little time to yourself, you're building that clarity, that a little bit of inner peace and ease, that just helps you not have to fight for your opinion and just, as we said before, to listen. And so it's like an antidote to being snappy is knowing what's important to you and then speaking up ahead of time to have at least your needs known, met in some way. And so we're not holding on to something that we're not saying. We're just, and too much of the time, people hold on to those things because they don't know how to say it in any kind of skillful or gracious way. I think it's perfectly fine for one partner to say, hey, when such and such happens, this is what it helps me to hear in that moment. Write it down, put it on the fridge, and like repeat that thing. And it's like, guys love that. It's like, just tell me what to say, And it's not that they don't mean it or it's not real. It's just never thought of saying it like that before. It's like, even just, I had a girlfriend a long time ago and she wanted to hear, you didn't do anything wrong. And I just want to talk about something. Because she totally did something wrong. But I love that. She just wanted to lead with, you didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. And in the big picture, nobody did anything wrong.
Right.
And
in the big picture, that's true.
Yeah, right.
So. Well, and I think, I'm sorry to say, men in particular get really uncomfortable with these uncomfortable conversations and don't know what to say because I think that boys are not taught or trained in this. And women in some, not all families, of course, but women can be more naturally led toward wanting to communicate better, but boys not necessarily, and they're just not taught. So having a script in a way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you can have a script and also just leading with something positive is macro script, shall we say. Like lead with something positive, like you didn't do anything wrong. That's something positive. You can lead something positive on the inside, like a silent soul statement, like I am bigger than any complaint. You're not saying these things out loud. You're just saying them inside. Like I'm remembering, you know what? I am bigger than any complaint. And then feeling that and remembering the truth of that, which just takes a millisecond, you're just better able to then act better. And as my serenity increases, I can hold circumstance more lightly. A little more complicated soul statement, but it's all the same stuff. And so breathe love in, that acknowledge your own heart, acknowledge whatever's just been said, and tap the brakes, slow it down. And sometimes when you're initiating a conversation, you might say, in the interest of clarity and friendship, I just want to talk about something for a second. That kind of, it's a nice way to lead into, there's something you did I didn't like.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about when it's you, the self, that has done something boneheaded and has not been skillful? Mm-hmm. How can we approach that?
In my book, I actually talk about the power of the redo.
Yeah.
Where you catch yourself and you say, you know what? That's not the tone I really want to use with you. Allow me to say that again. Mm-hmm. And that takes courage. That takes a little self-awareness, and it implies a commitment to being better. And those are all wonderful qualities. And so when you say, I'm sorry, let me redo that, all of that comes into play of respect. I mean, in my experience, the partner tends to respect somebody who can do that and to catch themselves. And the other thing too is when you don't know what to say, just offer more of you. Just ground more into the present, into your body, and just bring your heart to the table. And so, don't know what to do, offer more of you.
I love it. How would you offer more of you?
I might turn so I'm actually facing the person. I'm not trying to do something else. I don't have maybe I put my phone in my pocket and just be like, you know what? I just want to put all my attention to this. This is really important to both of us. And I'm going to just put this over here. And I want to clear this up with you or work this up with you or whatever it is. And your friendship is important to me. And I'm here.
Yeah, I love that.
And another thing is substituting requests for complaints. So in other words, where you would have said, hey, I didn't like this thing, or you didn't do that thing, you can say, you know what would feel good to me is if you did this or that. So you're just trying to phrase it in the form of a request. And we'll say someone's maybe talking louder than you're comfortable with. You could say, I could actually hear you better if you spoke a little more softly. Or you can even up level that and say, what you have to say is important. And if you say it a little more softly, I could actually hear it better.
I love that. Actually, I have a girlfriend whose voice is kind of loud in the car. Here. So these are wonderful suggestions. It is like putting a space in the comment, putting a space, taking that space, reframing the energy around what you feel about it, and giving it space just to breathe a moment. Okay, let me reflect on what I want to say. Let me reflect on what this energy of this moment is, rather than the knee jerk type of reaction.
That's what's helpful with, when you spend that time in stillness, the more you can gain your own clarity, the more you're ready to go in the moment with something a little more graceful.
Yeah.
I like to say self-care is soul care. And one of the things that really struck me when I first met my current partner 11 years ago is her amazing commitment to her own self-care. I had never met anyone that refuses to rush. And I'm like, come on, let's get going. She's like, we'll get there. And so she just really takes care of herself so that she can do bigger and better things. And I really respect that.
Well, and of course, that just having that moment to reflect and say, okay, this is what is actually going on. It's not that she's dawdling. It's not like she's not taking this seriously. She's taken a moment to practice that self-care. And then for both parties, honestly, because the party who may be perceived as dawdling, saying, hey, I know I might be a little slow here. This is what's going on. I want to get it right. And then the other part, the partner saying, just taking that space and acknowledging what's really going on. So both sides, it's important.
Yeah, maybe I was worried about being too perfect. Like, we have to be on time. And I can remember one time in a Tantra training course, we were all there. We're sitting on our little cushions ready for class at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the teacher was late, like 10 minutes late. So we're sitting there 10 minutes. He shows up, he sits down, gets himself arranged, and he says, the student's job is to be on time. The teacher's job is to be centered.
I like that. As a former college professor who had a full-time job in publishing and was rushing to get to class, this was often a situation where I had to be late to class. And that's brilliant. Right. And recognizing what the role of each in this relationship is, the role of each in any given moment is.
Yeah. And your self-care allows you to be more present.
Yeah.
And it's part of how we fill up our emotional well. And I know I have a friend who speaks in those terms a lot. She'll say, I'm at 3/4 tank right now, or I'm at 1/4, or I feel pretty topped off. And so they're talking about their emotional fill levels.
I love that. Yeah, with my Sunday school kids, I'll ask them, hey, your check engine light is on. What's going on?
Right. There you go.
I don't know what's going on, but I noticed that there's something going on. And let's talk about that and let's be present and let's, invite a conversation about it. No, that is wonderful and brilliant. Yeah. What else do you bring up to couples? Like if somebody's coming to you and they're wanting coaching around their relationship, maybe things aren't going so well. Like, where do you start with that?
I start finding out where they are at and what they want. Are they scale of 1 to 10? Are they leaning toward looking for an exit, or are they wanting to lean in and make it better? So yeah, I just have to find out where their stumbling blocks are. And what's not being said is at the heart of a lot of issues. They end up arguing about something that's easy to argue about, but there's other values that aren't being met.
What is not being said? I
Right.
like, right. So why wouldn't we say the things that are not being said? Like, why would we hold those back?
Maybe we haven't developed enough of a vocabulary. We don't have an example of that. And so, like, for instance, maybe a woman is increasingly unhappy because she asked her man to clean out the garage, and he said he would, and he promised he would. And it's been 5, 6 months and the garage is still a mess. And then she's starting to wonder, how trustable is he? Does he keep his promises? And maybe I don't feel quite as safe and secure as I used to. And I'm a little colder to him. And it just comes from this desire to, if you promise to do something, you should do it in some kind of reasonable time frame. But it triggers a lot of other bigger emotions, the need for safety, the need for trust, stuff like
Well,
that.
and it triggers past experiences as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think
Right,
that's
right.
important to
Right.
acknowledge. There's so much more going on behind any given situation than just the surface level.
Right. And it's a question I'll ask, but the usefulness is in the other person thinking about it is your current partner, what's their chief complaint? What do they chiefly complain about with you?
Mhm.
And did any of your previous partners complain about the same thing?
That's a good point because then
Yeah.
that's looking at your patterns.
So maybe they're just being naturally human and you could step it up in some way.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's a good point. I like that.
Mhm. And it's helpful to keep in mind that, with any other person, I didn't have their family, their town, their gender, their school, their bullies, their friends, the whole thing. And so, of course, we're going to react in ways that aren't identical. And that's just human.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I used to be in a couple of bands, and you think it's hard communicating with one other person. Try like five at the your schedule and your expectations of practice and your musicality and what your influences are and how you want this particular piece to go. So it's like multiply it by five and then you get exponential. But to come down to the micro level, the one on one level, it's very, very hard because you do have all of these expectations that are unwritten, unexpressed, don't even
Right.
unacknowledged.
Right. And the more one person can be vulnerable and the other person hold that with respect and care, that just becomes a thing like, oh, we want more of this. So it get permissions then for more vulnerability going forward. And now the person that held whatever was shared with care and respect, that provides a model for when they share, then they can have somebody has a model of how to do that. And it builds in a good way.
Mhm. What I'm hearing too is that there needs to be the concern for getting it right and the listening to getting it right. Your point about being distracted or that I'm talking to you, but I'm like, yeah, I have to put this down. I have to not be distracted as I'm listening to you so I can really, really listen and see what's going on. So being mindfulness it just sounds like mindfulness.
Absolutely. Love it. Yeah. Applying mindfulness to interpersonal communication and presence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How am I feeling by what you just said? Am I triggered? Am I anxious about what you just said? Am I distracted? My stomach is hungry. Am I hot or cold and I'm not thinking clearly? Did I forget something and it's distracting me? Right.
Have I asked no follow-up questions to anything that was said? To
Oh,
show a little bit of interest, to actually be interested.
right. All of these things are so important. So I just have to ask, are you still taking clients? Are you working with people
Yeah,
one on
I am.
one?
I am.
You are?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. And I'm looking at your website now. It's corerelationship.com
Yep. That's
or
the one.
Coaching. For
Mhm.
persons who want more out of life and love, which is wonderful. So people can connect with you on that website and maybe inquire about doing some coaching.
Yeah, they can learn a bunch just about my approach from going through that. And there's a page about the book, and there's a whole lot of blog articles and writings and stuff like that.
That's wonderful. In fact, I'm looking at the page about your book, Soul Statements, a love coach's guide to successful communication. And this was voted best communication book of the year by Best Holistic Life magazine. That's an accomplishment.
It made my day, completely unexpected. Yep.
Day, week, month, and year. Wow. Do you know what their criteria was?
I don't know, although I did speak with the editor of the magazine, and she said, just so you know, we don't hand these out. This was a committee, and they had lots to choose from, and that's this that you won the vote. So
That must have been just something to knock you over.
yeah, as a first-time author, it's really pleasing.
Right. And of course, you have a wonderful quote from Dr. Judith Orloff.
She's a
Wow.
fan.
She's also your partner,
That's true.
which is really cool. So to me, just the fact that Dr. Judith Orloff is involved with you and thinks you're a great person and loves your book, that to me is like probably the best praise that I could think of for this book. So you must be a very dynamic duo.
We are.
How did you meet each other, as a matter of fact?
Just common friends. They all just kind of pointed to me. She was kind of looking for somebody to, be with, and 3 different people said, "You should meet Corey."
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Very high profile people here and doing important work, very important work. Do you ever team up and collaborate on things, blogs or articles or
Uh,
workshops?
we've talked about it. We just haven't done it yet. I mean, it was kind of more of a talk when just before COVID happened, and then the world changed. So we haven't kind of revisited.
Because I mean, these are both different sides of the same coin. I don't know, that's a bad metaphor, but different points in the same spectrum here. So Judith's work on empaths and highly sensitive people, and then your work on dialing down on communication and clarity in communication.
Mhm.
This seems like a match made in heaven.
I think so, literally.
Oh, yes, literally,
Yeah.
literally. And I know she's got the psychologist background. So, what was your background before you became a wilderness coach and now a love and relationship coach? Where did you come from?
Well, I grew up on the coast of Maine in little town, and
I can hear
uh,
it now.
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And so I was an Eagle Scout. And from there, actually, my first real job was as an Aboriginal skills instructor. I had saved up my money, and in the summers, I would go down to rural New Jersey where there's this little school teaching us fire without matches and shelter with just your bare hands and edible plants and all that stuff. And so I was actually trying to figure out what I was going to do just after I graduated high school. And they called me and said, "Hey, we remember you as a student. We'd actually like you to come work." And so I was there for 3 years. And so I loved it. And my closest friends today are people from that time.
Th-
Yeah.
Right, because talk about trial by fire, talk
Right.
about
Right.
being in the trenches.
Yeah. And so then 3 years later, I was looking around for something else. And a friend of mine had been introduced to this program up in Idaho where it was taking young people attempting to become sober into the wilderness for 21 days. And you just had a blanket, a little bit of food, and a knife to carve things, and a poncho. I think that's like it. And so I did that for 3 years. And then I moved to Southern Utah, same kind of program, did that for a bunch of years. And then I had a chance to work with adults, so 18 and over, doing the same thing. And I love that the most of all because they had had enough life experience where they were more serious about sobriety. They knew it was getting real. And so we had a great time, 3 more years doing that. But then I wanted to not sleep in the sand every night. And I thought maybe I wanted a bed and breakfast. So live in a house.
Mhm.
I figured things out.
So, how did you make this shift to coaching?
Just from going to these personal relationship, personal development workshops and meeting people and having them want to work with me. And it just one thing led, and going to Love Coach Academy and just being in the mix of it all.
Wow. So, what one thing do you want listeners to take away from this?
That you can learn to call up the best part of you in a moment.
Which is an extension of the wilderness work that you were doing.
That's right. That's right.
Because in that moment, when the flies are biting and you're on the slippery rocks, you've got to call up that best part of you.
That's right. And I just really quickly, I'll tell you one thing that we did that I loved. And some of the programs were 42 days as well. So they're out there for a while. This one program, we could do these longer things because we had 42 days with these people, is at sunset, we would set somebody out on a dirt road and we say, just start walking. And 45 minutes later, we put out the next person, 45 minutes later. And so they're strung way out and they no flashlight. They just had a little blanket and maybe a canteen of water, nothing else. And we would drive their stuff way around to this place. And we would just say, you walk until you get to a campfire, and that's where we'll be. And I mean, we're talking 20 to 25 miles they had to go in that night by themselves, alone, walking. And they didn't know how far in miles. They just knew it would take all night. And that if they stopped, it wouldn't be great because the other person would kind of run into them and you're not supposed to talk with anybody. And so it's like a moving vision quest in the dark, no flashlight. I mean, we even did it in drizzly nights. And we would say to them, if you're feeling the ground is soft, it means you're not on the road, and go try to walk sideways and find the road again. That's what we did. But just all night, hour upon hour, just trudging in the dark. And you think about things and you think about your parents and you think about stuff you did and you just reflect and you're gaining, hopefully by the morning, some more clarity on your part of how you got here, your responsibility, the crap you did, and being clear of, what parts of that were okay and what parts do I want to toss away and what do I want for myself. So that was a big clarity exercise.
Love that. You're forced to depend on yourself. You're forced to figure it out.
Right.
That's
Right.
actually low-key brilliant.
It was.
And then, so I also want to ask, is there anything that we haven't brought up, anything we haven't mentioned or talked about that you think is important?
Just fearlessness is a great quality, that being willing to become embarrassed. And so in my younger life, that was my most giant fear, was embarrassment. And so I did all sorts of things to prevent myself from potentially being embarrassed. So I wouldn't speak up and I would just stay quiet in times where it would have been better to speak up. And so the more fearless you can be, the more connected to your power you can be.
And I think it does take fearlessness and bravery to have difficult conversations and move through relationship, and having to deal with another person and their expectations expressed or unexpressed and your expectations expressed or unexpressed. It just takes bravery. It takes, yeah. I had the conversation recently with somebody. It's like, that was really brave of you to have this conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
so proud of them.
No, I just thought of another little catchphrase.
Yeah.
Bravery is bonding.
That bravery is bonding. I'm going to write that down. Bravery is bonding. But it is. I think that's why we get the idea of the trenches, being in the trenches and going this trial by fire together. That's why we get that. Bravery is bonding and clarity is sexy. Love that.
Right. Yep.
Thank you so much. I will put your website in the show notes, and I would love to have you back if you've got a new workshop or anything that you're wanting to talk about, or a new book, blog series, anything like that. Have you
Okay.
back to talk, because I think these conversations are important and this type of work is very, very important. We have to turn to each other, and we've got to do that with clarity and ease.
Very nice indeed, for sure.
Thank you so much, Corey. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Don't know what to watch next? Decisions. Well, we've got some suggestions. You can click this little video here and watch that. It's something that we think you're going to like. If you like the last one, you're going to like that one too. You can also click on the subscribe button. And if you do that, then you'll get notifications whenever we have a new video up. Win-win, right?